Imagine leaving everything behind and embarking on a journey that would last 30 years, crossing 3 continents, facing scorching deserts, treacherous storms, and powerful empires. This is the story of Ibn Battuta, the greatest traveler of the Middle Ages, who journeyed more than 75,000 miles in an era without accurate maps or airplanes. Can you imagine the courage that required? In 1304, in Morocco, Ibn Battuta was born, a man who would become one of history's greatest explorers. At that time, the Muslim world was experiencing a period of cultural and commercial expansion, and Ibn Battuta decided to take advantage of this global connection to make his pilgrimage to Mecca. But what began as a simple religious journey transformed into an epic odyssey that took him from Africa to the Far East, through fascinating kingdoms, empires, and cultures. His accounts provide a unique window into the medieval world, and today we're going to unravel this incredible journey. During a time when most people never ventured beyond their village borders, this remarkable man would visit lands that seemed like they belonged in fairy tales. He'd dine with sultans, escape pirates, survive plagues, and document it all in extraordinary detail. Some historians even argue that Ibn Battuta traveled further than Marco Polo, making him perhaps the most well-traveled person until the modern age. What drove this man to keep moving when others would have long since returned home? What wonders did he witness that have been lost to time? And how did his writings revolutionize our understanding of the 14th century world? If you love history and want to unravel the mysteries of the great empires, like this video, subscribe to the Medieval Archives channel, and don't miss a single episode. Join us as we step back in time to witness the extraordinary adventures of a man who refused to stop exploring. In the year 1325, at the remarkably young age of 21, Ibn Battuta left his hometown of Tangier, Morocco, to make the pilgrimage to Mecca. This journey, known as the Hajj, was expected of all devout Muslims who could afford it, but what happened next was anything but expected. Unlike most pilgrims who would return home after fulfilling their religious duty, Ibn Battuta found himself captivated by the wonders he had witnessed. Driven by an insatiable curiosity about the world beyond Morocco's shores, he made an extraordinary decision. He would keep traveling. His ambition, to explore distant and unknown lands, to witness the diversity of cultures across the Islamic world, and to document everything he saw along the way. And thus began one of the greatest adventures in human history. Picture the world of the 14th century, a time when travel was not only uncomfortable, but often deadly. Disease, bandits, unpredictable weather, and treacherous terrain claimed countless lives. The average person might travel 10 miles from their birthplace in their entire lifetime. Maps were rudimentary at best and completely wrong at worst. Yet none of this deterred Ibn Battuta. When he first set out from Tangier, Ibn Battuta traveled along the North African coast, passing through modern-day Algeria and Tunisia. But even this initial journey proved challenging. In the desert town of Tlemcen, he fell severely ill and was bedridden for months. Many would have taken this as a sign to return home, but not Ibn Battuta. Despite still being weak from his illness, he pressed onward toward Egypt. Did you know that by the end of his journeys, Ibn Battuta had traveled so extensively that he covered a distance equivalent to circling the earth 3 times? This astonishing feat happened in an era when the vast majority of people never even left their hometown. To put this in perspective, his total journey of 75,000 miles would be like walking from New York to Los Angeles and back more than 13 times, all on foot, horseback, or sailing vessel. The scale of his achievement becomes even more remarkable when you realize that he accomplished this without modern conveniences. No hotels with comfortable beds awaited him at the end of exhausting days. No refrigerated food or clean drinking water was guaranteed. No antibiotics existed to treat infections or illnesses. Every step forward was a step into potential danger, yet his thirst for knowledge propelled him onward. And what truly sets Ibn Battuta apart from other travelers of his time is that he didn't just follow established trade routes. While merchants typically traveled fixed paths between major commercial centers, Ibn Battuta often ventured into regions rarely visited by outsiders. He deliberately sought out remote communities, obscure holy sites, and roads less traveled, creating a patchwork of experiences that would eventually form one of the most comprehensive accounts of the medieval world ever written. One of Ibn Battuta's most remarkable stops was in the territory of the Mongol Empire, where he witnessed firsthand the grandeur of one of history's most extensive empires. By the time Ibn Battuta arrived in Central Asia in the 1330s, the once unified Mongol Empire had split into 4 khanates, with the region he explored falling under the rule of the Chagatai Khanate. What he discovered there would challenge many of his preconceptions and provide us with invaluable insights into this fascinating civilization. Imagine the scene as Ibn Battuta approached the legendary city of Samarkand, with its azure-domed mosques and imposing structures rising from the dusty plains of Central Asia. This was a city that had trembled under the hooves of Genghis Khan's horses just a century earlier, and now stood as a jewel of the Silk Road. Ibn Battuta described it as one of the greatest and most perfectly beautiful cities in the world, with its bustling markets filled with goods from China, India, and beyond. The wealth on display astounded our traveler. In Bukhara, another great city of learning, he witnessed libraries containing thousands of manuscripts, with scholars debating philosophy, medicine, and astronomy in multiple languages. What particularly surprised Ibn Battuta was the religious tolerance he encountered throughout the Mongol territories. Despite being a devout Muslim himself, he noted how Christians, Jews, Buddhists, and followers of traditional Mongol shamanism all practiced their faiths openly without persecution, a stark contrast to many other regions he had visited. But this journey was far from comfortable. Ibn Battuta's writings vividly describe the bone-chilling cold of the Central Asian winter, a shock to someone raised in the warm Mediterranean climate of Morocco. On one particularly brutal stretch of road, he wore 7 layers of clothing and still shivered uncontrollably. His face became so numb from the cold that he couldn't even speak during parts of the journey. He wrote, "Never in my life have I experienced such cold, nor anything more painful." The vast distances between settlements posed another significant challenge. Unlike the densely populated regions of the Middle East and North Africa, the Mongol territories featured expansive, empty landscapes where travelers might ride for days without encountering another soul. Ibn Battuta joined caravans for protection, as bandits frequently preyed on isolated travelers. These caravans moved like small cities across the steppe, complete with traders, pilgrims, animals, and guards, sometimes numbering in the hundreds. What makes Ibn Battuta's accounts of the Mongol Empire so valuable to historians is that he arrived during a pivotal moment of cultural transformation. He witnessed the empire during its transition from a nomadic warrior society to a settled civilization embracing urban life and international trade. His keen observations captured details about Mongol customs that would otherwise be lost to history, from their traditional hospitality rituals, where guests were offered fermented mare's milk, to the complex hierarchy within their courts, to the role of women in Mongol society, who enjoyed far more freedom and authority than women in many other cultures of that time. Ibn Battuta's descriptions of this magnificent empire, written without the bias that colored many European accounts of the barbarian Mongols, offer us one of our most authentic windows into this misunderstood civilization. Through his eyes, we see not the ruthless conquerors of popular imagination, but a sophisticated society that had created the largest land empire the world had ever known, one that connected East and West as never before. In 1333, after 8 years of constant travel, Ibn Battuta arrived at the glittering courts of India. This wasn't just any India. This was Delhi under the rule of Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq, perhaps the wealthiest and most eccentric ruler in the world at that time. The Delhi Sultanate stretched across northern India, commanding vast resources and armies that made European kingdoms look tiny by comparison. Imagine the scene as Ibn Battuta approached the Sultan's court. Enormous elephants adorned with jeweled headdresses, hundreds of soldiers with gleaming weapons, and nobles dressed in silks embroidered with gold thread. The Sultan himself was surrounded by incredible opulence. Precious stones glittered from every surface, and the air was heavy with exotic perfumes. Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq was known for two things: his extraordinary intellect and his unpredictable cruelty. He spoke multiple languages, studied philosophy and mathematics, and had a keen interest in medicine. But he was also infamous for his brutal punishments. He once ordered the skinning alive of a religious leader who had offended him. This was the dangerous, brilliant man who would become Ibn Battuta's patron. When Ibn Battuta was presented to the Sultan, something remarkable happened. The Sultan became captivated by this foreigner who had traveled so extensively through the Islamic world. Here was a man who could describe firsthand the holy cities of Mecca and Medina, who had visited Jerusalem and Constantinople, who had traversed the legendary Silk Road. For the knowledge-hungry Sultan, Ibn Battuta was a living library of experiences. So impressed was the Sultan that he made Ibn Battuta an offer that seemed too good to refuse: a position as a Qadi or judge in the royal court of Delhi. This role came with a generous salary, servants, and a place among the elite of one of the world's richest cities. For a man who had been traveling with few possessions for nearly a decade, it must have seemed like an extraordinary stroke of good fortune. But serving this unpredictable ruler proved far more dangerous than Ibn Battuta could have imagined. The Sultan's mood could shift like desert sands, and those close to him often found themselves suddenly out of favor, or worse. Ibn Battuta witnessed countless executions and fell into a pattern that became common among the Sultan's courtiers, trying to stay useful without becoming too visible. During his time in India, Ibn Battuta documented fascinating aspects of Indian society that no other medieval writer captured. He described elaborate Hindu festivals with dancers and musicians, the practice of sati, where widows threw themselves on their husbands' funeral pyres, and the complex caste system that structured Indian society. He marveled at tropical fruits he'd never seen before, and was astounded by the monsoon rains that transformed the landscape. But political intrigue soon darkened his golden opportunity. Court rivals, jealous of the foreigner's favor with the Sultan, began plotting against him. Ibn Battuta found himself navigating a maze of alliances and betrayals worthy of any modern political thriller. At one point, he barely escaped when rebels he was suspected of supporting were brutally executed. Another time, he fell so deeply out of favor that he feared for his life, retreating to a cave where he lived as an ascetic for several months, a dramatic change for a man who had been living in luxury. The most harrowing moment came when Ibn Battuta's ship was caught in a violent storm while traveling along the Indian coast. The vessel was wrecked, and Ibn Battuta watched helplessly as his accumulated wealth, including the priceless gifts from the Sultan, sank into the Arabian Sea. He himself barely survived, washing ashore with nothing but the clothes on his back. It was yet another stunning reversal in a life full of dramatic ups and downs. After 8 years in India, longer than he had stayed anywhere else during his travels, Ibn Battuta finally seized an opportunity to leave when the Sultan appointed him as an ambassador to China. For our intrepid traveler, this was both an escape from the increasingly dangerous court politics and a chance to see yet another fascinating corner of the world. Did you know that Ibn Battuta traveled the equivalent of circling the Earth 3 times? That's over 75,000 miles in an age when most people never ventured beyond their village. If you're enjoying this video, please like it, share it, and subscribe to the Medieval Archives channel for more incredible stories from history. And let us know in the comments, which place would you visit if you could travel back in time? Would you brave the opulent but dangerous court of Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq, or would you choose another destination from Ibn Battuta's epic journey? After his tumultuous time in India, Ibn Battuta's wanderlust remained unquenched. Rather than returning directly to his Moroccan homeland, he set his sights on the eastern coast of Africa, a region known to Arab traders as the land of Zanj. In 1331, he boarded a ship bound for East Africa, embarking on yet another remarkable chapter in his extraordinary life. What Ibn Battuta discovered along the Swahili coast would astonish even this well-traveled explorer. He arrived at a string of wealthy city-states unlike anything most Europeans or even Middle Easterners could imagine existed in Africa. These weren't the primitive settlements that many outsiders assumed populated the continent. These were sophisticated urban centers with stone buildings, complex political systems, and immense wealth. The crown jewel among these cities was Kilwa, located on an island off the coast of modern-day Tanzania. Ibn Battuta described it as one of the most beautiful and well-constructed towns in the world. Imagine approaching this island city by ship. Coral stone buildings rising several stories high glistened white in the tropical sun, with elegant mosques featuring graceful minarets that served as landmarks for incoming vessels. The Great Mosque of Kilwa, with its distinctive domes and arches, was one of the most impressive structures Ibn Battuta had seen in all his travels. What made these cities so incredibly wealthy? Gold, vast quantities of it. The Swahili city-states served as middlemen in a complex trade network that connected the gold mines of Zimbabwe and the interior of Africa with markets across the Indian Ocean. Ibn Battuta noted how gold dust was weighed so casually in the marketplaces of Kilwa that it seemed almost commonplace. One sultan he visited served meals on plates of solid gold and drank from golden goblets studded with precious gems. But gold wasn't the only source of wealth. Ibn Battuta documented how these ports handled a dizzying array of goods. Ivory from elephant tusks, ambergris for perfumes, leopard skins, tortoise shells, and exotic spices all passed through their harbors. Perhaps most valuable were the enslaved people who were tragically bought and sold there, a dark aspect of medieval commerce that Ibn Battuta matter-of-factly recorded as part of the economic landscape. The culture of these East African coastal cities fascinated our Moroccan traveler. They represented a unique blend of African, Arab, and Persian influences, what we now call Swahili culture. Ibn Battuta observed that while the ruling elite claimed Arab ancestry and practiced Islam, they had developed distinct customs blending multiple traditions. He noted with surprise how the locals built their houses from coral stone without using mortar, creating structures so solid they would last for centuries. One of the most colorful descriptions Ibn Battuta provided was of a royal wedding celebration in Mogadishu. He watched in awe as hundreds of people processed through the streets, beating drums and singing, while the Sultan's guards cleared the way with silver and gold staffs. The city's women lined the route, wearing their finest jewelry and colored silk garments, burning incense and spraying rosewater on the passing dignitaries. Ibn Battuta's observations of local customs were remarkably detailed. He described how the people of one coastal town would line up to greet important visitors, spraying them with rosewater and burning fragrant aloe wood. He documented special meals where guests were served roasted fowl, fish, bananas, and coconut steeped in coconut milk, local delicacies that reflected both the bounty of the land and the sophistication of the cuisine. What makes Ibn Battuta's account of East Africa so valuable to historians is that it provides one of the only detailed first-hand descriptions of these advanced civilizations before European colonization changed them forever. Without his writings, we might know far less about this golden age of East African urban culture. His observations help correct the mistaken notion that sub-Saharan Africa lacked advanced civilizations before Europeans arrived. The wealth Ibn Battuta witnessed in East Africa was so legendary that later Europeans, who heard tales of these cities of gold, assumed they must be myths or exaggerations. Portuguese explorers who arrived more than a century later were stunned to discover that the rumors were largely true. By then, however, many of these cities had begun to decline as trade routes shifted and new powers emerged. Ibn Battuta had captured them at their zenith, a moment of cultural and economic flourishing, preserved only in his remarkable writings. After 3 decades of relentless exploration, Ibn Battuta finally turned his face toward home. Imagine the emotion he must have felt in 1349 as he caught sight of the familiar coastline of Morocco, a homeland he'd left when he was barely more than a boy. The man who returned was no longer the naive 21-year-old who had departed for a simple pilgrimage. He was now a weathered traveler of 55, his body bearing the scars of countless adventures, his mind a treasury of experiences few humans in history could match. Word of Ibn Battuta's return spread quickly through Tangier and soon reached the ears of the Sultan of Morocco, Abu Inan Faris. The Sultan, an educated man with a deep appreciation for knowledge, was captivated by reports of this extraordinary traveler who had returned from the edges of the known world. He summoned Ibn Battuta to his court in Fez and made a request that would change history. He asked Ibn Battuta to record his adventures for posterity. But there was a problem. Ibn Battuta, despite his brilliant memory and vast knowledge, was not a writer by training. The solution came in the form of a young scholar named Ibn Juzay, whom the Sultan assigned to work with the great traveler. For months, Ibn Battuta would sit with Ibn Juzay, recounting his memories while the young scribe captured his words, occasionally embellishing them with literary flourishes. The result was a book called Rihla, which simply means the journey in Arabic. But there was nothing simple about its contents. Within its pages lay the most comprehensive eyewitness account of the 14th century world ever recorded, a literary treasure that would nonetheless remain largely unknown to Western scholars for centuries. What makes the Rihla so extraordinarily valuable is its unique perspective. Unlike European accounts of foreign lands that often viewed non-Christian cultures with suspicion or contempt, Ibn Battuta observed the diverse Islamic world and beyond with the eyes of someone who could move relatively freely between cultures. He documented the commonalities that united the far-flung lands of Islam while also capturing the rich diversity of local customs, architecture, food, and social practices. Historians today treasure his detailed descriptions of everyday life, details that more formal historical chronicles often omitted. Ibn Battuta told us what people ate, how they dressed, how they celebrated weddings, how they buried their dead, how they conducted business, and how they worshipped. He noted the role of women in different societies, sometimes expressing shock at customs that differed from those in his homeland. From his writings, we learn that women in the Maldives went bare-breasted and controlled much of the commerce, practices he found both scandalous and fascinating. One of the book's most remarkable qualities is its geographical scope. Ibn Battuta visited territories that correspond to about 44 modern countries. He traveled from his native Morocco across North Africa, through the Middle East, into the Byzantine Empire, through the vast steppes of Central Asia, across the Hindu Kush Mountains, throughout India, down the east coast of Africa, and possibly even to China. No other medieval traveler whose accounts survive came close to matching this range. After completing the Rihla, Ibn Battuta fades from historical records. Some accounts suggest he became a judge in a Moroccan town, finally settling into a quiet life after decades of adventure. He died around 1369, perhaps finding peace in the familiar landscapes of his homeland after seeing so much of the world. But while the man passed away, his legacy grew ever stronger. Initially, the Rihla was primarily known in North Africa, admired more for its entertaining stories than its historical value. It wasn't until the early 19th century that European scholars rediscovered this treasure and began to recognize its immense importance as a historical document. Today, it stands alongside Marco Polo's travels as one of the most valuable windows we have into the medieval world. What separates Ibn Battuta from other famous travelers is the personal nature of his journey. Unlike Marco Polo, who traveled primarily as a merchant with specific commercial goals, or the Chinese explorer Zheng He, who commanded massive naval expeditions with imperial backing, Ibn Battuta traveled largely for his own edification and spiritual growth. His journey began as a pilgrimage and evolved into a lifelong quest for knowledge and experience, making him perhaps history's first true global tourist. The world Ibn Battuta described was remarkably interconnected despite the limitations of medieval travel. Muslim merchants, scholars and pilgrims formed networks that spanned continents. A traveler with the right credentials, like Ibn Battuta with his legal training, could find welcome and familiar customs, even in places thousands of miles from home. Through his eyes, we see not isolated civilizations, but a complex web of cultural and commercial relationships that challenges our modern assumptions about the medieval world. In many ways, Ibn Battuta was ahead of his time, a global citizen in an age when most people's horizons extended no further than the next village. His curiosity about different cultures, his adaptability to new circumstances, and his desire to document what he saw for future generations make him not just a great medieval traveler, but a thoroughly modern spirit, a man whose legacy continues to inspire explorers and adventurers today. The life of Ibn Battuta stands as a powerful testament to the transformative power of curiosity and courage. In an age when travel was not merely uncomfortable, but potentially deadly, this remarkable man chose to embrace the unknown. He crossed scorching deserts where caravans regularly disappeared without trace. He sailed treacherous seas in wooden vessels that could splinter during storms. He traversed mountain passes where bandits lurked and freezing temperatures claimed countless lives. Yet through it all, his insatiable desire to see what lay beyond the next horizon drove him forward. What makes Ibn Battuta's achievement even more extraordinary is that he undertook these journeys in the 14th century, a time without phones to call for help, without modern medicine to treat illness, without reliable maps to guide the way. Each step into unknown territory required a leap of faith that few of us today can truly comprehend. In his 75,000 miles of travel, enough to circle the globe 3 times over, Ibn Battuta connected worlds that rarely intersected. He broke bread with sultans and sailors, merchants and mystics. He observed the common humanity that united people across vast cultural divides, while also documenting the rich tapestry of differences that made each society unique. His legacy extends far beyond merely being a record-breaking traveler. The book he left behind, the Rihla, offers us an unparalleled window into a world that would otherwise be lost to history. Through his eyes, we can walk the bustling streets of medieval Delhi, sail alongside the wealthy merchants of East Africa, and witness the splendor of the Mongol courts. His observations help us understand that the medieval world was not the isolated, stagnant place it's often portrayed to be, but rather a complex, interconnected web of trade, ideas, and cultural exchange. Perhaps the most inspiring aspect of Ibn Battuta's story is that he was in many ways an ordinary man who chose to do extraordinary things. He wasn't a mighty conqueror like Alexander or Genghis Khan, nor was he a wealthy merchant like Marco Polo. He was simply a curious soul who wanted to see the world, and in doing so, he created one of history's most remarkable legacies. In our modern era, when we can cross continents in hours rather than years, Ibn Battuta's story reminds us of the value of deep, immersive exploration. It challenges us to look beyond the tourist attractions and truly engage with different cultures, to seek understanding rather than mere sightseeing. What would you do if you had the chance to embark on a journey like Ibn Battuta's? Would you have his courage to keep pushing forward when faced with extreme danger? Would you maintain his openness to new experiences and different ways of life? Would you, like him, be willing to step completely outside your comfort zone in pursuit of knowledge and adventure? Ibn Battuta's final message to us across the centuries might be this: the world is vast and filled with wonders waiting to be discovered. And even the longest journey begins with a single courageous step. If you enjoyed this exploration of one of history's greatest travelers, please leave a like, share this video with friends who appreciate amazing historical stories, and subscribe to the Medieval Archives to accompany us on more journeys through the fascinating world of the Middle Ages. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming adventures into the past. What other medieval travelers or explorers would you like to learn about next? Let us know in the comments below. Until our next historical adventure, thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the life of Ibn Battuta.